about that concept and some conclusion. So in the subsurface or in defined surfaces, we need component or other way I can say we make a design in such a way that it can be replicated or explained with three components, which is defined by vertical stress and two of the horizontal stress component and one of the stress magnitude, which we consider the magnitude of SH max. These are three principal stress component. If anyone have read stress in physics, like which is basically force per unit area, given its like in a Cartesian coordinate system, you can see how many components it may have. Starting from 81 components, we finally come back through several assumptions, this scenario itself. Vertical stress can be easily derived. We know that this is the weight of the overburden, but the other two stress component, one is least principal stress, which call it SH mean, and the other is SH max. SH means can be measured, but in a very specific interval or couple of depth points. SH max we cannot directly measure. It is normally modeled utilizing all other properties. But to define subsurface geomechanical aspect, we need to know some all as rock strength properties as well. Why I'm discussing this? Because these are quite important as we go through this box itself to brief that out. In our prospect, we already know that the some of the example I'm showing here as a CT scan image of some of the rock sample. You can see probably these rocks. It is very, you can say, moderate to moderate, but permeability is extremely low, nanoscale range. You cannot see probably through microscope. We can see the permeability. We call it nanodarcy range. So the most important thing to extract from the unconventional reserve is through fracturing. And doing that hydraulic fracturing, we need to know the least principal stress magnitude, because that is one of the biggest component which drives this hydraulic fracturing operation. Again, how that will impact overall production scenario or the long-term prediction estimation, these are the really great impact to know that least principal stress magnitude. And in case of gas cell, it actually make it a more complex scenario. If I see this right-hand cartoon diagram where I'm explaining several 4 different scenario: anisotropy versus heterogeneous, anisotropy versus homogeneous, isotropic versus heterogeneous, and homogeneous isotropic. So probably this sample you can in a scale you can probably consider it as a anisotropic. In that sense, it has a lot of layer or in a homogeneous, but the other component you can see is heterogeneous. So these samples came from basically within maybe 5-meter depth interval difference, but how much change is happening in deposition, that is quite obvious. That's why for unconventional gas cell, it's really important we have a better idea about the stress magnitude when you're going to develop the field. But why this motivation comes from? This motivation actually comes from the scenario of this worldwide unconventional resources. If you can see this map, probably one of the United States map, if you can see, a couple of years ago, they have basically taking their energy from most of the coming from Middle East and stuff. But now presently, they have so many able to develop this gas cell that they actually exporting that, especially some of the natural gas is coming to India as well. So over the years, that scenario has changed because of this revolution in this multi-stage hydraulic fracturing, deformation-based study, lot of laboratory experimentation in rock mechanics and overall related field itself. Australia also have some good prospect, and there is some future prospect as well in terms of gas. but the most important challenges remains is the production profile. So this is the example I'm showing it for a Barnett cell with a months of activity rates. So if we see here, as soon as the production started, within a 20 months time, there is a rapid decline. Then it's still continuing as a flat line. It will be more clear if we plot in the logarithmic scale. So the obvious reason is considered. Yes.
Please stop the background discussion, please. Someone discussing at the background, please stop it. Okay, go ahead, Partho.
Okay. So the main points coming from this kind of analysis is that there is a rapid production decline. So several assumptions can be made. One of the reasons is considered as we creating hydraulic fracturing and propellant is distributed, but because of cell is a viscoelastic material, that means over time, whatever fracture we created with the propellant placement, these are slowly closing over time. And that monthly production decline also can be modeled as I'm showing it here. But this kind of scenario is not only observed in one of the sample which is displayed here, Barnett cell, but other kind of formation as well, Eagleford, backend, Marcellus formation. You can find all these details from the unconventional geomechanics book by Jobak and Kohli. So we take that concept itself, like what the production decline is happening. So probably consider that viscoelastic behavior of the cell, probably one of the results. And that we try to model it through using laboratory data. So in this first part, I'll give you a brief more idea how the least principal stress normally measured in the field. Then a brief discussion about creep, viscoelastic modeling as well as stress layering. Before going into the details of the discussion, as I previously mentioned, creep is basically in a time-dependent deformation, like if you take a sample or a rock itself, and in a given constant stress, you leave the sample or the rock itself deform continuously over some duration of time. In this case, that duration can be hours to maybe days, maybe couple of weeks. That's the laboratory scale we can do. But in the geology scale it's happening for a years, maybe couple of years, 10 years time itself. So basically from small scale creep deformation, we can able to derive the viscoelastic behavior or how this stress can be relaxed over the duration of time. As I previously mentioned, the relationship between creep and the stress relaxation is exactly inversely proportional because of the linear viscoelastic theory. I think I can give you a more better example what linear viscoelasticity is. So we probably know if we apply a stress in a material, there is a shortening or expansion can happen, right? So it can be either expanded or it's shortened inside. If we remove the stress, basically it should come back to again its original position. That means there should not be any strain remain after the stress is removed. In this scenario, we have seen in the laboratory experiment, there may be very minor amount of still inelasticity is there, that is due to hysteresis behavior. But if we consider is a broader concept of linear viscoelasticity, we can consider this as a exact example of linear viscoelasticity without considering the plastic behavior. Coming back to the least principal stress estimation method, which is normally done in the field. So in a given one of the reservoir or in a well, if you have a 5 drilled well, probably you can find 1 or 2 depth points where these least principal stress measure, because it's quite expensive and always not easy to get that measurement. How this has been done? So in a drilled borehole well, they normally try to pump fluid from the surface, and in a specific depth points, they want to create a fracture, small amount of fracture. So if you replicate the scenario in the right hand side, so what you basically monitor with time, you just applying pressure from the surface to the borehole wall, and you monitor how the pressure is built up. So pressure will go linearly, and as injection or your pump is running, and then as soon as the fracture created, you would starting to see there is a breakdown started. So once formation breakdown start, it can propagate a little bit of fracture, very tiny fracture, and after some time you just shut the pump off, and that instantaneous certain pressure is considered as a quite good estimation of the least principal stress magnitude. Sometimes you can run this scenario in several circles so that your estimation of the least principal stress is accurate. But the challenge is again, this is only a single point measurement. As I mentioned, the vertical stress can be measured from the overburden weight, which is come from density log. So you can get a continuous profile of vertical stress. In this case, if your depth interval is 3 kilometers, you have only 1 point, you basically create a gradient from surface from the surface to the actual depth point of interest. But there is already equation available, which we call known as Eaton's equation, probably applicable in the industry. It's using for last maybe more than 3 years. So before I think go to the next part of this discussion, let's show you important here. This least principal stress or the stress component, which we consider is one of the components come from actually gravitational loading, which is because of the overburden load. That formula or the equation part comes from this gravitational loading. It also includes the anisotropy behavior of rock. So if we have a vertical VTI media, then we can probably see the Young modulus have two components, vertical and horizontal, similar for Poisson's ratio. And also this component consider the poroelastic behavior or the if there is a formation of water, how that can impact as well. The other part of this equation basically deal with the horizontal stress, which is arises from the horizontal tectonic strain or the tectonic activity what is happening. So these two terminology here, epsilon small h and epsilon capital H, these are the minimum and maximum tectonic strain occurring along minimum and maximum horizontal stress direction. But remember, these equations or this constant is a unknown terminology. Normally, people consider as some constant value or start with some value so that they can do calibration with the field measurement. No direct measurement of this parameter is possible. But the stress or the stress component which you are estimating here, these has deposited some of the rock which we are considering, it has deposited over geological time period. So rock has deposited and then maturation diagenesis happened, followed by upliftment of the tectonic activity over the years time. But the equation is presented here basically considering the current day or the elastic behavior of rock it is, you are basically measuring and then estimating its stress. No time component is there. If you consider basin modeling scenario or the people who is dealing with the mechanical stratigraphic modeling, they always consider time as a the time factor itself. So we thought, why not? We should also consider that time factor in estimating SH mean. So from that concept, our this viscoelastic and creep component comes from, and that's what I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides. And also why that is important, we also able to see not only from our study, but beforehand there is already existing material or the published material available. This is an example which is showing why this stress behavior can varies from the layer to layer other than a constant line. Like you can see several red dotted line is there, which is like a constant stress profile. These are one of the well in the Colorado area in 2003. Nelson published this data set. So one of the area is you can see this yellow triangle or the showing the sand interval, and the red is the shale or marstone interval, least principal stress directly measured. And the pore pressure is showing here with this blue triangle itself. So in the sand interval, as pore pressure increases, we expect that the least principal stress should increase. But for the shale interval, it is already shown quite high amount of stress is visible or the measured directly from the field itself. And one of the conclusion he made that because of the cell's viscoelastic nature of the stress relaxation behavior, its stress magnitude reaches near to almost the vertical stress component. Further, Jovak and Kohli also demonstrate through a cartoon diagram, and also we also see similar scenario here. If we have a sandwich sand layer in between two cells, you probably can see because of this viscoelastic relaxation approach, some of the stress magnitude of which is considered as anisotropy in nature, like there should be difference between principal stress, maximum stress as well as the vertical. But because of this behavior, the stress component actually going to become isotropic as well. So taking that concept further, we going to demonstrate this viscoelastic concept. And it's also important that this viscoelastic concept or the creep deformation behavior, which is considered this time factor, we can able to actually model the long-term impact. Like some of the scenarios explained you the production decline curve, why it is happening. But we can able to model that scenario that in reality, why it is happening if we take that component into account. In the example I'm going to show is one of the prospective gas cell formation. Here is in Australia, where it has been already reported. In our previous study, the faulting regime is normal faulting or a combination of strike slip faulting. We call it a hybrid faulting regime. Taking that consideration, here I want to show you another example, probably from the US gas cell as well. This is a study by Young and Jovak, where they try to model why some of the fracture or the hydraulic fracture they generate here propagated beyond that interval. If is a stress, least principal stress is a gradient, if it is increasing over depth, it should not go upwards direction. It should always go downwards direction, or maybe it should confine within that layer itself. Their study found that if when they are doing the stage 5 fracturing operation, they can see a lot of microseismicity happening in the above layer itself. And once they go to the similar concept, that viscoelastic modeling itself, you can able to be from the lab scale, and then the model find out that the stress layering actually we have. So it's really important, not only just that production decline, product decline in long term, but as well as the microseismic activity which could be generated because of this hydraulic fracturing activity. Coming back to this main concept in itself, how that can be done in from the laboratory scale to this field scale. So basically, we require 3 different parts to compute this viscoelastic stress relaxation. So first component is we need a database of creep behavior of the rock itself. So which I'll come back later little bit to discuss how those properties can be estimated. So if we have get the creep parameters from the laboratory scale, then we can use that to build our viscoelastic stress accumulation model in the model domain utilizing wall line logs from this laboratory data. And then you can utilize your vertical stress component. And one of the assumptions is you need to make that a constant stress magnitude within a layer, which is defined by phi here. I'm not going to discuss the mathematical details about it, but the concept is very simple. Least principal stress can be computed as a component of vertical stress times that constant I mentioned, which is a constant varies between 0 to 1, and this difference in differential stress which originated over the time scale. This differential stress accumulation geological time scale has been computed again using this another formula here showing this differential stress depending upon the strain rate. We need the 2 of the components of creep, as I mentioned, B and N, and then the time component as well. So in this scenario, we need to know the strain rate, B, N, as well as time. So time is normally available from the stratigraphic information or the information. Strain rate is also you can compute if you have a particular measurement of least principal stress already available. You know the rock Young modulus, you can calculate that. And B and N basically come from our creep parameter itself.
So Partho,
Yes.
Partho,
Yes, sir.
this is only basically involved at the very shallow level in the borehole. Am I correct?
It's quite deep. It's on the 1D sense. Yes.
And
We're calculating
how much deep?
is deep up to 3 kilometer, 4 kilometer from the.
Yes, that is in the borehole up to 3 kilometer deep.
Yes.
Okay, so this stress is caused by ambient stress field. Am I correct?
Yes,
Or
we are calculating the least principal stress which is originated from the tectonic activity overall at this stage, current state scenario of the subsurface.
so my question is that if any
Yes.
can we measure the total amount of stress generated because of the over a geological time period in any particular area related to earthquake prone region?
I think one of the study one guy does in US, I think he takes some of the sample from Japan. Yes, it can be possible, but we need to get those kind of samples from the depth itself to bring that sample from that depth, and then able to do experiment collecting the data. Then probably can able to do some kind of modeling to see. But I think that one or two example is there what they have tried quite successful. Yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you. Now coming back to this laboratory creep response section, how can be or the creep deformation can be explained, the interpret from the data, its mechanical properties, and then example I'm going to show this SAG prediction. So in this case, I'm showing some of the CT scan image of the samples which has been extracted in two orientation, vertical orientation like perpendicular to the bedding, and another is parallel to the bedding. This one to not only to get creep both in the vertical and horizontal direction, so that anisotropic nature of creep can also be observed. But again, these are all in the sense like in a given sample scenario, we are recreating a triaxial stress state. So some of the samples characteristic is shown here, like by sample characterization means I'm trying to mean here basically the composition of the what kind of rock they are formed about, their mineral composition. These are comes from the XRD test. We call X-ray diffraction. We need to take a small powder sample and go through that XRD process, and then you can interpret how much amount of quartz, feldspar, pyrite, carbonate, clay, TOC, etc. As well as porosity, you can measure separately in other method, and we basically club together in terms of three component here: strong phase based on mechanical response as a quartz, feldspar, and pyrite. Intermediate phase is basically a combination of calcite and dolomite in this scenario samples, and the weak phase we consider as clay, total organic richness, because shale has a lot of organic material which is contributing to this hydrocarbon, as well as porosity. And we normally try to cover a broad range of samples so that more or less it can be extracted from the low carbonate interval to the quite high significant amount of clay as well as organic matter presence. We still don't have enough sample in this case, 15 sample, but at least it can give some quite bit of idea that this concept can be applicable as well. This is the test setup itself, multi-stage triaxial test. So because of the limited sample availability, we try to capture as much information.
So Partho,
Yes.
just 1 second. This laboratory is developed in your institute or
Yes,
this laboratory?
it's
in your
already
inst-
there. Yes.
How much cost involved in for developing this type of laboratory? Any
So,
idea?
So this one, I think it's a joint between university as well as CSRO, the Commonwealth Government Lab, and I think they also this infrastructure they completely built. It probably couple of millions dollar. I think I'm not sure exact cost, but I think I can give some idea. If
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So this multi-stage triaxial test has been performed utilizing this automatic triaxial cell. Schematic is showing here, and this is the zoom section of this part where sample is inserted. You can see a jacket is there because we don't want to get the sample exposed with the oil. Oil is used here as a fluid to apply pressure, confining pressure, and then we have another load cell is there where we apply the axial stress. And at the same time, we can able to measure the ultrasonic response or the P and S wave response. We have a feasibility of to put 20 sensor across the sample as well as the top and bottom of the sample, so that we can look the some of the microstructural changes utilizing these ultrasonic data as well as this rock physics modeling. So this below is showing how experiment has been done. So the process normally starts once you put your sample itself. You want to apply some amount of confining pressure. Confining pressure means you apply exactly same amount of pressure all over sample like isotropic. So that if you have any presence of micro cracks or some small amount of fracture which is not visible from inside outside, you want to close those so that you can actually measure its mechanical behavior without considering those presence of micro cracks. Once we done that phase, then we started the axial loading from top and bottom section, and you can see several stages has been done. So like loading and unloading, because we can do this as a single stage if we have enough amount of sample is there from each depth interval. But if not, then we can do several stages of loading and unloading cycle. And this loading unloading was maintained considering that sample does not reach its fatigue stage or damage stage, utilizing its loading rate itself. And at the one of these stages we call in situ stress condition stage, which we recreated and where creep was measured. Like we apply constant axial stress at a given confining stress, and we leave the rock to deform within 6 hours time. So basically this data measured over 6 hours time for all the samples, and that data was utilized to infer the creep deformation. After that, at the final stage, rock has been allowed to reach its failure, and then post-failure deformation has also been measured. If we shown you this scenario itself, you can see this loading and unloading cycle. So as I mentioned initial stage, you can see there is a lot of nonlinear response between stress and strain. But once we increase confining pressure, you can see this is getting this nonlinearity almost going. There is a lot more flat section was coming out. A linear response is coming out between stress and strain graph. And this section is basically showing this creep response, a little bit zooms version itself. So here I think I forget to tell you that during this deformation, we measure this deformation along the axial direction. So you can see these two LVDT panel is there, which will measure axial deformation, and we also can measure the radial deformation. There is a radial cantilever here as well. So we can measure radial strain as well as axial strain. But in this case, because this is limited by biaxiality of the experiment, not true triaxial, which is called true triaxial means three stress is completely different. So radial strain is negligible. Mostly strain is accumulating in the axial direction during the time itself. So after obtaining these data sets, we can interpret that. So basically next stage is you can feed the data set utilizing different existing model, or you can build your own model itself. It has been already seen, and several model has been proposed: logarithmic model, power law model, simple 1D power law model. So in this scenario itself, we actually model this creep compliance function, which is the ratio of strain by differential stress with just b t to the power n. So b and n is two of the component expressing the creep behavior. So by b we mean the instantaneous response of the rock at a particular given stress, and n is how the deformation is happening over time. So n component actually derive your time dependent component, b is expressing your elastic response, you can say. And on the other way around, the other concept which is discussing the relaxation modulus, which is exactly inversely proportional to the JT function, which is 1 by inverse of B and T to the power minus L. So mathematically, it can be shown that relaxation modulus is inverse of creep, but in our data also we see exactly the same thing. So which I am going to show now. Diagram, we just take the creep compliance function diagram to obtain B and the right. We're trying to show here that this wants to compare the static modulus of the studied sample and their inverse of 1 by B component. We see almost a linear
Partho,
relaxation.
Partho,
Yes.
one question is raised by a student in the chat box. Please
Okay.
give the answer.
So the how many times a sample take for triaxial test? So once you loaded the sample, you just basically controlling the loading and unloading scenario. So in this case, we do loading for 5 stages and unloading for the 4 stages in total. But if you want a single stage, probably then you just go and apply the stress, measure your PIP, and then allow the sample to fail itself. It's depends upon basically logistical challenges of the sample. If you have enough sample, you don't need to do multi-stage trial. You can do with single stage also. So
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
here in this example, which I am trying to demonstrate, that the creep is basically inversely proportional to the relaxation modulus, so that both the creep parameter we can obtain, we can use to derive our differential stress, the equation I have shown previously.
Partho,
Yes.
I am not getting the physical meaning of relaxation modulus.
Okay, so relaxation modulus is basically, I think probably I have not explained that. So relaxation modulus means in this case creep is we hold the sample at a given stress. The opposite way around is we fixed or the sample is under a particular given strain amount, and we try to basically sample so that how this stress is relaxed over the time, we try to measure that. Because the tectonic component actually come from this stress relaxation, either faulting or fracturing or any other activity is happening.
But
They
but
had
but that is relaxation time. So that is relaxation modulus of time.
so it's a relaxation modulus. The creep and the relaxation modulus is basically inversely proportional to each other. So that's what I'm trying to explain here. That time component is already coming there in the equation. If you see here, this equation, this is the equation itself. So differential stress. So we try to get that component of the B and N, and time will come from the geological time period. And then we want to see how much differential stress it can accumulate over the time duration. But the concept came from that stress relaxation, because any activity, any tectonic things is happening, basically it's releases stress over the time duration itself.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is an example I'm going to show. I think I have another more example before concluding. In this example, I'm trying to show the same concept we see or discuss now. We want to apply that in a field scale. So this is the formation.
One question in the chat box. One question in the chat box.
So let me read the question for you. When we perform the triaxial test with multi-stage consolidated range test, it overestimates the friction angle, which in turn result in overestimation of cohesion and stress. How to tackle with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, I think. So in this case, overestimation by like you need to quantify that overestimation, right? So when we do this multi-stage triaxial test, we also quantify the uncertainty associated with all the properties or friction angle you are mentioning. And we find if it is a like not only this study, I think all the previous study already reported. If you do single stage of the same sample and if you do multi-stage of the sample, all of these properties does not vary beyond 2% of that original magnitude. So we already well known about the fact that if multi-stage track we go for a multi-stage triaxial, there is a 2% uncertainties if we go for a multi-stage. So we already considered that fact in our conclusion or discussion section.
Okay.
So this is the area I was working in the Canning Basin, and our prospect is a Goldware gas cell formation, which has several lithological boundaries. So Goldware 3 is the most prospective area, which is sandwiched between two limestone layers, which is Goldware 2 and the Williara formation. In the left hand side, I'm showing the rock composition or the mineral composition of the studied samples, and as well as our sample itself. So in this case, you can see lab sample is showing in gray color. And I think I need to mention it here. I have not discussed that scenario. We also find some of the sample is we don't have that amount of database available here, but similar creep experiment recently been done in the US gas cell with more of a carbonate rich sample mostly. And we consider a couple of their data points so that we can get a broad range of database to establish the relationship between two of the creep parameters, B and N. And I'm going to that this should not be a problem because we validated not only this well, another two different basin as well. So here we are showing in this logarithmic plot the gamma ray response. The second area is B and N. B is the elastic compliance, as I already shown in the previous slide, that the B parameter can be easily obtained. I think B can be exactly obtained from the static Young modulus component. If you have a sonic logs or the cross dipole sonic, you can easily compute B, and the N is coming from our established B and N relationship. So we compute B from the lab, we compute N, and then we established a relationship between B and N to build the N profile. And from there, we apply the viscoelastic equation. I'm showing there, considering the time scale of 300 million years. So 300 million years comes from the stratigraphic age when rock deposition happened, but no upliftment or any other activity happened there. From there itself, we compute differential stress, and then using the method we already mentioned previously, SH mean has been computed. So in this case, green color is replicating the SH mean magnitude using viscoelastic model, and we have only 1 point available in this case validation. That's why I'm going to show you another example. But one of the important point is to mention here, as we go from the shale layer to the limestone layer, top or bottom, you can see there is a variation of stress, there's a lower amount of stress. The example I demonstrated by Young and as the Nelson example is exactly replicating a similar scenario as well in this Goldware sample. I have also
One question in the chat box.
okay, sir.
Partho, I am reading it for you.
Okay.
Why oil is being used in the test? Does confining pressure in megapascal scale cause some temperature artifact which may result in change relaxation rate?
Yeah. So oil means you can use different kind of oil, some temperature sensitive oil, not temperature sensitive oil. So these are all calibration done. So there is no, we already done with a like a pure aluminum sample whose Young modulus Poisson's ratio behavior you already know. So before test done, everything has been measured and checked with the real value, and there is no issue. And oil is used in this case because that's the only feasible mechanism available in the instrument setup to reach that stage. But this temperature consideration is already there. So when this test run, we measure those properties, but we also monitor the any pore pressure buildup, any changes in temperature, any temperature fluctuation. So that's why normally when this test done, whole lab is in a air con, like that air con never stop, like it's running 24/7 in 22 degree, so that always outside temperature remains same. Whatever inside temperature build up, we can exactly monitor if there is any fluctuation happening or not.
Okay.
So following this, there is a model comparison. Model comparison means we computed the model from the Eaton's modified model, the equation I shown, and as well as our viscoelastic model itself. So the one of the important thing you need to notice here in the cell layer, Eaton models is saying probably some of the area is showing lower stress, as well as go to the limestone layer, it's showing higher magnitude. Whereas the viscoelastic stress model is exactly opposite. Limestone layer have a relatively lower stress magnitude or least principal stress than the cell layer. And it's explained the similar scenario as shown in this one of the example. If you perforate in this interval here, your fracture will probably go upwards, upward or downward, both direction it can go because stress is lower there. But once it reach here, it cannot propagate further because you have a quite high stress boundary. That has been simulated also in this scenario. I'm not going to show that example. So Eaton's modified model versus the stress I compared, and you can see this viscoelastic model actually behaving as the layer is changing. So that is quite important. And I already previously mentioned there is a quite bit of uncertainty in Eaton's model because you need to know about Biot coefficient, you need to know accurate estimation of pore pressure, you need to know both the tectonic stress component, whereas our estimated properties directly came from the laboratory data, and only assumption is that magnitude of relative stress. This has been validated not only this Canning basin, but the another basin. So this study I presented this year in the ARMA conference, rock mechanics conference. This is another gas cell prospect here, where one of the for prospective interval is Caringinia formation as well as the Coquetier cell, and we choose this formation because there is already 5 stress magnitude estimation available. So each layer there is a least principal stress obtained from the field itself, which I previously shown. And also utilizing one of the concept here, I'm not going to elaborate this part itself, the component of SH max, but this is the result again for that particular basin in one of the wells. Again, we are showing of clay here, 2 of the component of part B and N, the least principal differential accumulated, and the least principal stress magnitude has been estimated. You probably can see among the 4 points, one of the points will be a little bit lower than this, but 3 of the points is exactly matching the behavior of the stress profile. So when you have a lower clay component, that means if you have a mix of limestone or sand, you can see there is a less stress amount. But when cell is increasing, you probably can see that variation is following that scenario as well. So from these 2 basin experience, we are trying to explore now in the basin scale if future research is going on in this area. But it's quite interesting to see that this concept is getting good exposure in not only just Canning basin as well as Park basin. So
Partho,
yes, sir.
last slide. It is up to a depth of 3.3 kilometer.
Yes.
So up to this depth level, you will find huge overburden pressure.
Yeah.
So that you are subtracting from the, or how you are you controlling all these things?
So we consider this stress is basically the 2 horizontal component. One is minimum and another is maximum. So minimum is basically least principal stress. So one component is definitely gravitational loading, and that subtraction is coming from the concept of, like in a given layer, you need to consider your stress regime is fixed, like that magnitude of phi. Variation of your three component or the relative variation is between 0 to 1. And you are mentioning why we are because the maximum component should be there. So phi is considered in such a way that one of the components subtracted from the vertical stress, the other maximum stress component, which I am showing here, it has been added with that phi.
Okay.
So in conclusion, we have shown here that 1D power law creep constitutive parameters utilizing that viscoelastic concept can able to capture the least principal stress magnitude given a constant phi value for a given stress regime. And also this model able to explain the lithological variation of SH mean profile at depth. And in the next stage, I think we are trying to replicate rather than 1D response, we try to create a 3D response if can be validated. Finally, I think I would like to thank again Professor Khan and Dr. Mohit for giving the opportunity to speak. And if you have any more question, I think I can take.
Yes,
And
Partho, I have a very quick question.
Yes.
So in multi-stage traxial test, you have mentioned that you are actually allowing the rock to take 6 hours to deform.
Yeah.
Okay, so there might be many samples of the rocks available with you, right?
Yes.
So like deformation time was chosen based on the certain limit like that a rock can approach to for the deformation or something. Like
okay, the time you are mentioning, right?
yes.
Yeah, so this is a basically it's a like decision we have made. We are going to measure for 6 hours because 6 o'clock maybe or 8 o'clock we stop recording and then leave overnight itself so that we can get 6 hours time to relax. But people have taken like this brief scenario for like starting from 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and probably they don't see much variation if you measure for 2 8 hours or if you measure 3 days or 4 days. The whatever the creep component you are getting out, there is not much difference on the scenario. So we just try to accommodate our time frame and literature data and come up with 6 hour optimum time to measuring, because it takes already it's a multi-stage test, and then stop of it you need to do creep for 6 hour duration. So it's like 6-7 months total experimental time.
There is a
So what-
question. There is a question in the chat box. Sir, did you study the variations in pore water pressure during triaxial test by using pressure transducers, and what variations were observed?
Yeah. So in this case, that's why I mentioned it's a 1D model approximation utilizing the samples which we received as a unpreserved state. So by unpreserved means once the sample come out on the surface, it's open on the air and it's no longer preserved. And in case of shale, it's mostly not fully saturated with water. It may be partially saturated, and we have not recreate any resaturation here because again this kind of shale is extremely permeability is nanodarcy. Its saturation, probably one of the sample, maybe you need to put it in the lab for a couple of months to do saturation, and then since the sample is not exposed in the air, we cannot recreate the scenario, but it can be done. Those scenario or the pressure can be done, and also here we have done it here, the impact of the portion, but tried with some other sample like not shale, like a pure sandstone or limestone, where the saturation can be done quickly. So we have already checked what impact it has if we do saturation or if you do not do saturation in the scenario itself. So it's not that much in this case itself, because you are mostly looking here non almost nano-Darcy permeability range cell, where the poroelastic effect probably negligible.
I think we do not have any more question in the chat box. There's one more.
One
Are
more
we,
question.
yeah, are we using some type of scaling while predicting for Earth at certain depths?
By scaling, I'm not sure what you are mentioning by scaling.
I mean, I think he's talking about some kind of scale you are using. Might be there are many types of scales are available to predict that pressure variations at a certain depth of the Earth.
Okay, I think these will answer. So in this scenario, all this assumption, as I mentioned here, it's basically vertical stress, this differential stress from this equation, and this component phi, which is the ratio of the three stress component. So if you have already measured data in subsurface, you know it's vertical stress, minimum stress, and maximum stress. So in a given layer, you can calculate phi. So only that is the assumption you need to make here, like uniform distribution of relative institute stress. If you know the stress regime, it's already equation is there in the published document. You can calculate what the phi value you should use for the scenario. But we have not done any other scaling except whatever laboratory data and this assumption we made.
I have one question, Partho.
Yes, sir.
You have analyzed your data through ternary diagram. Am I correct?
Yes, Turner diagram, yes.
But never you try it through cross plot. What is the logic behind it? How people always prefer cross plot, but you are using ternary plot, ternary diagram.
Oh, this mineralogy?
This is actually used in mineralogy, seismology, this ternary diagram.
Oh, this one? Yes.
Yes, yes.
Because it is because we are trying to show here three component in just one image,
But in another one also I have seen the ternary diagram. Another
that's
one is there.
That's also similar diagram. It's on the log scale. This is from the laboratory scale. But when I actually look the mechanical response or the like how the weak phase actually controlling the mechanical behavior, we done a lot of cross plot there. But because this is, I just want to summarize in one slide what is the composition of the sample. That's why I'm presented here.
No, you also equally has published this in your paper also, the same diagram?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I think we have reached to the conclusion part of this webinar. So before we go, we all would like to thank Partho for enriching our knowledge from his experiences and your insight on assessment worldwide unconventional resources, measurement of least principal stress, viscoelastic modeling, stress layering, and the creep response and its applications, and like sample characterization, multi-stage triaxial testing is truly very important to all of us, and we learned a lot from your presentation and your talk, and the interactive session during the discussion was I think remarkable, and you have given very detailed answers to all the questions, so we are very much thankful to that as well. And I would like to thank all the participants also, including the students and the faculty member and our head of the department, Professor P.K. Khan sir, to attend this webinar. And with this, I wish all the best to
Professor Somen, Professor Mohit,
yes, sir.
I will ask one question. Partho,
Yes.
Actually, thank you for your excellent talk and sharing your knowledge and thoughts with our beloved students as well as my faculty colleagues. But only I want to know, do you have any vision for developing any lab in your future, or in which direction it will go?
Yes, of course. Like
If any department, any institute give you some offer for a position, then what type of thinking in you actually to develop a lab? That I want to know actually. Though it is not related with this.
yeah, like in terms of probably at least as we are working in the geophysics or geoscience domain, so one of the lab definitely we need is feasibility of rock physics study. If we do not have this kind of quite detailed multi-stage triaxial and stuff, but at least we should able to do uniaxial stress. We should able to measure both vertical and horizontal velocity, as well as some of the scenario of like
Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea or any vision to develop it rightly in the field? Do something like that.
yes,
Rightly in the field, a lab.
we can because I was involved quite a bit because I have a 6-month training before I use that instrument and stuff. So I need to go through almost every check and balance of the system before I can use it. So I already have very clear idea what are the things required, from where you get all the parts and stuff. So you can build it up. It should not be a big problem.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Partho,
Partho, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Partho, am I audible, Partho?
Yes, sir.
Yes, just very nice talk and other things, but I have some quick queries. What each actually students was asking
Yeah.
that suppose you have plotted this ternary diagram. This is the centroid of all the samples you have here, or some particular samples you have plotted here. Because if you collect the many number of samples, I think there should be some sort of scattered things, and some part will be there will be some overlapping part. Can you actually have plot it just the direct or it has some filter out this data?
Because laboratory data is very limited, so either you have 10 or 15 sample, and each come from the exact particular depth interval. There is no overlap. We are sampling, but if you like the example, I think I show in the mineralogy data from the wildlife logs. So you probably can see these are small dots are all from the wildlife data. Maybe every 1 meter you have sampling from the wildlife logs. Then you can see a lot more distribution of database itself. But both can be done, but normally not that difference is seen. So probably you can see distribution is quite, there may be some scatter as well. So.
Okay, and another thing is that in your conclusions, you have drawn that some with the power law.
Yeah.
So this, I think this enforced pressure and the geomechanical power law already, it is established phenomena. Have you added some dimension in that in this power laws in analogy?
Yeah, in the dimension means we try to see
dimension. When you want to say you have added any component which will be may open up the research in this field.
Yeah, so one of the component we considering because presently we are applying couple of wells and stuff. Like can it be done in the basin scale? One of the approach. I think we're trying to build a mechanical stratigraphy model utilizing rock properties I developed, and then included for a 3D geomechanical model in that sense, like 3D list principal model utilizing several wells. The other scenario is I think I have not shown here because this kind of estimation or any kind of deformation normally comes from their microstructure behavior, either specific surface area or its total pore volume, those area itself. So we try to see how the creep can be explained through microstructure through specific surface area estimation, and we have come up with some kind of equation itself. So presently planning some patent on that because it's the first concept we developed. So I have not shown here. That's why that's the scenario.
Acha. Another thing actually, watch I have gone through the process. That
Yeah.
scaling are not that is separate explicit scaling operation, because there some people have seen that they have used some fractal theory, I think, to find out that power law coefficient, power law decay or this coefficient in the approach. Whether can you have any in that directions that in modeling purpose or estimation of the sure power law coefficient in this
So,
using
so
some fractals or
I think we have not gone that much that much depth itself.
that is
Basically,
actually I was going through some of the papers or
yeah.
just I
Yeah,
share
there
some
there is
in the
of
directions
course.
because this when this study started with this geomechanics in KTB borehole basically. So
Yeah.
there is a earlier paper I have seen in Nature. So there this some of the concept they have used and published about the fractal nature of your this distribution in the power law estimations in many. So you can also see some of the literature in that line because these laboratory scales and these well established, it is okay. But in the thing in practical cases, in an application site, if you more exposed, but data is a problem, obviously. This collecting and this. Okay. Means,
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, Bogdan,
Okay,
Mohit,
then.
go ahead for winding up.
Yes, so thank you, Partho. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation and the talk and the detailed answer to all the questions that were
Yeah.
asked by our esteemed faculty member, students, and the people present in the audience. So with this, I wish you all the best for your future, and please do keep in touch, and we will also find an opportunity to interact with you more in the incoming months, and we will keep on organizing such webinars in the future as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.